So I want to introduce our next individual. Well, I don't know how else to describe him other than just an absolutely incredibly knowledgeable individual on just a lot of different topics. He is going to entertain us. He's going to teach us. This episode for our town hall is going to be about Hannibal crossing the Alps with elephants. Let me introduce you to Nicholas Lloyd, also known as Lindybeige. He has over 1 million subscribers on his YouTube page. So over to you.
Thank you. I'm starting the clock now. I'm very conscious of the fact that I have 10 minutes to talk to you about a absolutely colossal topic. If I were to try to give you a 10-minute summary of World War II, you might think that was a bit ambitious of me. Well, this was a world war as far as the ancients were concerned. I'm just going to cover myself up so you can see. There you go. There's the Mediterranean. So you've got Italy in the middle there, with the blue area, and you've got all the various protagonists. Well, actually, not all of them. You've got a lot of the main protagonists in various colors around the map there. And of course, to the ancient world, that was the world. So they probably regarded this as a world war. And whereas World War II only lasted 6 years, or 4 if you're American, this war lasted for 18 years. So an entire generation grew up with this war ongoing. There were 3 Punic Wars. The one I'm going to be talking about most is called the Second Punic War, and historians have rather imaginatively called the others the First and the Third. Punic is actually a Roman term, an adjective for the culture of the Carthaginians. Now, Carthage, can you see Carthage? It's towards the bottom right of the map. I hope you can see that. Make some noise if you can.
Yes.
You can. Okay, so at the end of that arrow. Okay, so that's where he was from. It was a Phoenician colony on North Africa. And this is a very crude summary. These green arrows going around to clockwise from Cartagena. You see it all the way back to Carthage. Those are the movements of just one general, Hannibal. And they are a gross simplification, but we've only got 10 minutes. So first thing to understand is that Carthage was a major and older power than Rome. If, for instance, let's have a look at it. So there's an artist's reconstruction of ancient Carthage. It was a rival to Rome. It was as big as Rome. It was as rich as Rome. It was as high-tech as Rome. It was as developed as Rome. Here's that same harbor there today. That's a big harbor. Here's another artist's impression of that harbor. The Carthaginians were possibly going to be the ones who would become the Romans. So if some of you, I imagine, have got degrees, and it says in some funny scrolling writing on your degree, cum laude or something, there'll be some Latin motto perhaps on your certificate. Well, if the Carthaginians had won this war, then you would have some scrolly writing, but it would be in Punic, not in Latin, because they would have been the power that took over the Mediterranean. Very quick summary of the first war. The Carthaginians lost. There you go. The second one is the one I'm going to concentrate on, because that's the one where the main player, the main character was Hannibal. And the third one, spoiler alert, the Romans win all of these wars, but the third one was very short, and it was the end of Carthage as a power base in the Mediterranean. So the second one, the Barcids. There was a chap called Hamilcar Barca. That surname means thunderer. And that was probably a pretty high status thing to have, particularly given that most Carthaginians, in common with Greeks, didn't use surnames. But he was an undefeated general in the First Punic War, and he was really annoyed with his government for not having supported him, for having forced him to give up Sicily, which he was fighting in. And then they piled more insults onto him after that. And he thought, right, I'm off. I am going to Spain. I'm going to conquer Spain. Now, you probably think of Bill Gates and Elon Musk and people like that as quite rich, worth a pretty penny. But the notion that Bill Gates might personally finance a war of conquest of Russia is ridiculous. But that's what the Barcids did. They were so wealthy that they decided, just as a family, right, we're going to conquer Rome. All right, we're going to defeat the Romans. We're going to do what the first war didn't achieve. So with their immense wealth in Spain, they had lots of silver mines and the like. Oh, I looked down at my clock and I see that the clock's not running. Why is it not running?
Not to worry.
I pressed the thing and it went beep and I, never mind. Okay. I've got these pictures now. I may as well show you them. Just to give you a quick idea of what the various people are looking at. This is what Romans look like on the right now. So it's before the classic Roman look that you're familiar with, but that's from 500 years in the future. The huge Roman Empire doesn't exist yet, and instead it's a republic, and there are citizens, soldiers, and that's what some of them on the right look like. And that's a Carthaginian war elephant on the left. I'll just show you one picture from the graphic novel about this war that I'm working on. If you want to know what the Carthaginians are looking like, there's some Samnites there, there's some Spanish either side there, and a Celt in the middle. So these guys would all have been in the Carthaginian army. I don't have time to talk about the soldiers, but there you go. So that's roughly what the soldiers look like. He was on campaign with his father from the age of 9. His father died, but he then took over the army at the age of 26, and he was on campaign continuously from the age of 9 to the age of 45. So he was possibly the most experienced soldier who ever lived. And he took an army over the Pyrenees, having conquered northern Spain, and then marching through southern Gaul, which is today France. A load of his guys went, oh, hang on, what are we doing here? And he said, oh, well, if you don't want to follow me wherever I'm leading you, you can go back. I don't want you. Go back to Spain. So he sent a large proportion of his army away. He then outmaneuvered a Roman army that first became aware of him in Marseille, which is towards the east of southern France. What the hell? They thought there's an army marching on, it can't be marching on Rome. That's just ridiculous, but maybe he is. So they put an army to block his way, and he outmaneuvered it twice. And the second time by famously going over the Alps. Yes, with elephants, but actually he only had 37 elephants. He had something like 50,000 men with him, but 37 elephants were really a minor footnote. Most of them died of cold later anyway. By the time he got to Capua, he had 1 elephant. Anyway, so he came with about 37,000 men, made it out of the Alps, and they were somewhat bedraggled, and they made it into what's called Cisalpine Gaul. That is to say, that part of Gaul, which is our side of the Alps, because Rome did not have all of Italy in this period, and the north of Italy was run by Celts who didn't like them at all because they'd been warring against them, and they were happy to ally with the Carthaginians, who then fought a battle at Ticinus, which I won't talk much. Essentially, they won. Hooray! But still a minor threat. They then fought another battle at Trebia, and then they won again quite decisively. And now the Romans are getting worried, and they send out the following year a pretty big army, 2 actually big armies under new consuls to deal with them. And he outmaneuvers them again, even more audaciously, if anything, than the more famous Alps march. He goes through the Arnus marshes, marching his men waist deep in water. There is nowhere to lie down that's dry for a week, and outmaneuvers them again, losing, and again, a lot of men on the march. He then sets an ambush, and at the Battle of Trasimene, which I have a spectacular picture of, which I may as well show you since I've got it. Is it that one? No, that's not it either. Come on. No, it's this one. No, that one already. Where is it? This one. No, that's Cannae. This one. Phew, there we go. So loads of guys being chased into a river from an ambush. And he absolutely annihilated them. And it's possibly the only instance of an entire army being ambushed by another entire army. And now Rome is thrown into panic, and they put together the biggest army that the ancient world had seen. Just to give you an idea of what were Roman, that's a Roman marching camp there. So that's a 4-legion camp. They'd have to build one of those in one night. And here we go. That's what a legion looks like. So that's a lot of men. They put 16 of those into the field, plus cavalry, allies, etc. They were not going to be beaten by this guy. This was 8 times bigger than anything they put in the field before. Let's just advance and engage the enemy. How can this go wrong? If you have an army that big, you just hit him with a hammer hard enough and he's just got to crack. Well, Cannae happened. You've already seen the picture of Cannae. There you go. And he completely enveloped them and absolutely annihilated them. And now, finally, the various subjugated nations around Rome, which, don't forget, was only a little city-state on the coast. It wasn't Italy. It wasn't a modern nation-state as we think of them. It was a city which had dominated the countryside around it. Just then, they started joining Hannibal's cause. And I probably have to wind things up pretty quickly now, I imagine. So what was his plan is one of the big questions that people ask, because we don't have the Carthaginian version of what this war was, what the Carthaginians were thinking in this war. At what point would he have been satisfied, oh great, we've won now, and have gone home? Nobody knows, but it seems that he was probably trying to get all the various allies of subjugated, enforced allies of Rome to side with Carthage, become independent nations as a buffer against Rome, and just hem Rome in. He didn't have to conquer Rome. He just had to strip it of its power, get rid of its fleet, and get rid of its allies around it, and leave it isolated. And then the Carthaginians would have been free to become the biggest power in the Mediterranean.
Wow.
And how long have I got? Is that it?
Wow. Well, thank you, Lloyd. You know, we have all heard about the story about Hannibal crossing the Alps with elephants, but I never really understood it until now. Yeah. That was fascinating. Thank you.
Yes, incredible.
Pleasure. Any questions?
It's a lot of fun. Do we have any questions for? And by the way, you got to check out his YouTube channel. It's Lindybeige. It's just let me tell you, you can spend a lot of time there.
It's phenomenal.
It is.
I have a question, Mr. Beige. Mr. Beige, I feel like I'm in a Tarantino film. Mr. Beige, you mentioned a graphic novel. What's that all about?
It's about the Second Punic War. It's called In Search of Hannibal, and I've been working on it for the last 3 years. I'm horribly late with it. This is one frame from it there. And it's being drawn by a Canadian guy called Chris Steininger. And I am concentrating on the character, who I haven't even mentioned yet, of Publius Cornelius Scipio, who later became Scipio Africanus, who was the man who won the Battle of Zama, which was the battle which finally defeated Hannibal in the Second Punic War. So he saw himself as the savior of Rome, but in my book, he's writing his history of the war, and at the start, when we meet him, he's godlike. He's just saved Rome. He thinks he's utterly ace. But the more he finds out about what actually happened in the war, the more he realizes, oh, maybe I wasn't that great after all. So it's a guy slowly deflating.
When does it get published?
As soon as we finish it. As I said, we are horribly behind. We are, really, I mean, like 2 years behind. Everything has gone wrong and taken longer than thought, but you know, we're most of the way there now. We're
well, the images look fantastic.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Don't all shout at once.
Just to make sure, the general in the story was Hannibal, so that was the Second Punic War.
The Second Punic War, yes. Hamilcar had 3 sons. They became known as the Lion's Brood. Hannibal was the eldest, then there was Hasdrubal, and then there were Mago, and they were all major generals in the war. All 3 of them separately invaded Italy at different times. A lot of the war was happening, whilst Hannibal was fighting in Italy, a lot of the war was happening in Spain. Actually, there's just one thing, I'll say one thing more. Hannibal was marching with an army that was out of supply. He didn't have a port. He was inland in Italy. He was marching around, living off the land, living off allies and what have you, fighting the Romans for 15 years. He was actually in the Romans' backyard for 15 years, and they never caught him and they never beat him. And modern generals, they all study him. How on earth did he manage that? And that with an international coalition army made up of people speaking dozens of languages.
Wow.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.